Hello, everybody, and welcome back to your property podcast. My name is Michelle Kearns, and with us today we've got Jane Scruggs. Hi, Jane.
Hi everyone.
Great to have you on. So, a little bit about Jane, for those of you who don't know her. Jane is the driving force behind Beam, which is a dynamic team of property virtual assistants who are all based in the UK. And together they excel at handling all aspects of lettings admin, compliance, and optimising portfolio operations for their property investor clients. With a keen focus on implementing efficient systems and processes, they free their clients to concentrate on scaling their property portfolios. Before setting up Beam, Jane gained valuable insights into the property industry as an investor relations manager in London for a London residential developer, and as the co-founder of Podfilm, which is a unique shipping container office development in Bristol. So quite a varied
Diverse background.
Yeah. I love doing this podcast because people come from all sorts of backgrounds into the property world, and there isn't really a set line. It's not like people just all come from corporate world or anything like that. People got a huge mix, and obviously if anyone does have any property background in whatever field that is, it's always useful, right, to
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've always worked in property pretty much since I started my working career, really, in some form or another. I worked for a property fund, which was Singapore based and Asia based and UK based. So I've always been involved in the industry in some way or another. So it was only natural to set up Beam and serve those people in those industries.
Well, you say it's only natural. I guess I'm not sure it's something probably in my skill set I'd like to do something like that. Lettings and compliance and all that kind of thing is my idea of hell. I'd like somebody else to just do all of that for me. So how did you transition from that world into what you're doing now?
Well, I mean, I set up myself as a virtual assistant because I was traveling very much over to Barcelona a lot of the time. So I needed something really I could work remotely. And I had so many contacts within the property industry from years of networking. So it was kind of a natural progression, which gave me that freedom to location freedom. And then obviously the pandemic hit. And so people became much more used to working on Zoom, working with a remote team, because you couldn't necessarily have people in the office at that time. So that really helped the business, actually. And up until that point, we were kind of quite sort of based or focused, I would say, on the pre-acquisition side. That was my background, deal analysis, development. But more and more people were interested in help with lettings management because, as we were just saying, it's not the most fun part of building a property portfolio, is it? So
not for me, no.
No. So, and I didn't have that much experience with that side, so that's why I started bringing on team members that had a lot of experience, years of experience, whether that's in lettings agency as branch manager, perhaps training other team members, or perhaps with their own portfolio, to help our clients understand that lettings process and actually take care of it for them.
Right, okay.
And that's how the business.
So how did you start with getting people on board? It's like the chicken and the egg, which comes first? Does the customer come first or the service?
I was very lucky, and I had quite a lot of inquiries, and I got to the point where I had too many clients or potential clients and not enough hours in the day. So I took on my first team member, I think in May 2020, and matched her with one of the clients, and it went from there, really. So all of my team are UK based, and as I said before, they've got super experience in the industry, so they kind of guide our clients through what needs to be done, what the processes are, and we solved that kind of problem where landlords just don't want to have to do the lettings and admin side. They get very stuck, and it drains their energy, and I understand that. They don't come on board to be property managers. So the team kind of take that stress away from them. And so it really just grew. And as I identified that problem in the businesses of our clients, that's where I really niched in lettings and property management support. So really helping landlords self-manage. But we also have clients with agents on board too, especially if they've got a large portfolio. There's still a lot of communication required with the agents and checks and measures and deciphering rent statements. So we have team members that kind of become that buffer, that intermediary almost, to free up the clients from those conversations on a daily basis.
Yeah, there's a few things in there. So I think it's really interesting that there's this gap between, people who want to self-manage, but they don't have the time, inclination, or skills. But also they don't want to spend on an agent. And especially if there's, you've got HMO, for example, you've got 10 tenants in one house, then suddenly they're looking at the 15, maybe 20% for an agent. And there aren't many agents who do specialize in that, particular niche as well. So I think some landlords kind of get a bit stuck with not being satisfied with the agents, but not wanting to do the work themselves. And then it seems like there is that gap in the market. But a lot of people, I suppose, don't really think to work with a virtual assistant or any assistant really. I think a lot of them just struggle on alone.
Yeah, that's really true. It's exactly the problems you mentioned that we come across, especially when you've got a large HMO portfolio, because then there's no economy of scale when it comes to using an agent. And sometimes if they're different locations, you're dealing with different agents, and obviously that takes a lot of time onboarding, managing to some degree. And with our clients, we give them, we set the processes and standards, so we control, the systems, the data, how those tenants are responded to. There's a bit more ownership of the operations for the client, but without the burden of the admin. And so, yeah, you're kind of setting the standards and the processes, and you can really create such a great, thriving portfolio when you've got that ownership of that information. And that's what we try and do for our clients.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you said before about how your team would be the in between. So for the landlords who do have agents, they're the in between person, but actually they're doing a lot of the checks. So whereas for a lot of people, they would just hope that the agent would do all the checks and that they don't need checking. But that's not always the case, is it?
No, that's right. That there are different agencies out there, and some are, I would say, more customer focused than others. It's a hard business, lettings agency. Sometimes it's quite low margin and high turnover, so you don't always get that continuity of staff. But we try and support the agents. So when we go in, we're not trying to move them out of the picture. We work with the agents to actually make their life easier, so they'll get a response from us rather than waiting for our clients to respond. We'll be working with them to make sure that the compliance is done and that they've got everything they need about the property. So it works really well, because even things like I've got a bathroom leak or the tiles need replacing, we can then go and find out exactly which tiles they were by asking our client or looking through previous invoices or receipts and saying, right, it's these ones, I can order them, let's get them. And by having that extra person that's willing to devote that time to those tasks, everything flows better and the communication is much more seamless. And as a result, the properties are thriving really. We look at also things like rent reviews, making sure that they're getting the best rent. We keep an eye on end dates for tenancies, so they're not always falling onto periodic tenancy, periodic agreements. There's lots of things, deciphering rent statements, making sure all of the costs are correct, and that quotes are accurate, work is done efficiently, and we see before and afters. So there's lots that we can get involved in with the agents as well.
Yeah, and obviously you built your team as a UK-based assistants. Was there any temptation to work with offshore assistants, or was it just you saw a niche with working with people from the UK?
I think it was because of what I knew. It was an area that I understood. And I think when you're kind of being that, it's almost, you know, an agency owner, I suppose, it's working with people in an area that you understand, with certain checks and measures that can be done, and you've got, you know, insurance, you've got compliance in terms of GDPR. There's a bit more control and understanding and regulation. And I think I didn't really want to train people up either. So I think that there's a huge value in working with overseas VAs, and some of our clients do also have an overseas VA, which we help manage and help with operations. But for me, it was just much more easier to manage, to have team members in the UK that understand the ins and outs of the UK market. And I learn from my team all the time. You know, I've got some really great team members, many of whom are ALA level 3 qualified. I have an ALA level 4 qualified team member too. So within the team, we've got all those resources that we can call upon and ask questions. And I think that has helped us all to learn, and me especially, and we can pass that on to our clients as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting actually, because I think for, you know, just thinking initially the difference between having onshore and offshore VAs, you've obviously got benefits to both, but for people working in the UK, you've got, you know, if English is their first language, then it's easier. Obviously you're saying they're trained as well, but the time zones as well, being able to work in the afternoons and the evenings is not something that's easy to do if people are, you know, if you're hiring a team from the Philippines or wherever, where it, you know, it's bedtime for them at 1 o'clock our time, 1 p.m. So I guess there's lots of crossover. I suppose the difference is the price point for it is the obvious one. So do you need to work with clients that have got larger portfolios to make that business model work, or how does that?
Yes, we do. So typically we tend to take on clients that maybe have, I would say, 25 tenancies if it's HMO, or maybe 10 to 15 single lets, to make our time worthwhile. And obviously there is you know, we're not the same price as Filipino VAs, so it has to be a cash flowing property really, for clients to say, yeah, let's go for it. Obviously we do take on clients sometimes with less than that, but we want to make sure we fill our hours and make them, you know, really use our time to its most value. So underneath that, really, most people tend to have Filipino VAs, or they're trying to struggle along themselves, and they kind of reach a tipping point with around 20 tenancies on average, where they're just really stressed and starting to spend all of their time on that. And I think it also comes down to how systemized you are as a person. Typically, property investors are more visionary people, in my experience. You know, they love the vision of creating something. They love the deal making, doing up the properties, obviously, and the admin side is not their forte. So then having to create structures and systems to onboard an overseas VA is sometimes quite a challenge and a hurdle. So they don't sometimes, you know, bring Filipino VAs on board, but some do. And I think it really depends on your nature. But what I have created in the last few months is I've been working on providing those resources for those investors that are probably at that stage, you know, maybe less than 10 properties, 20 tenancies, to help them onboard their Filipino VAs or their overseas VAs, so that they don't have to think, oh my God, what am I going to give them? How am I going to control them? How do I explain my property portfolio to them? Because I do speak to a lot of people at that point, that before they're ready to come on board with us. So hopefully I can give them something for everyone, no matter what size you are. I
can just imagine those first conversations of like the point at which they get to you is like, help.
Yes.
What have I done? It's a complete mess. What should I have done at the beginning? It's too late now. How do I fix this? So I imagine there's a lot of fixing going on at the beginning of organizing and sorting, and then it's just maintaining after that and growing the business. So
that's it. It's getting those foundations in place, and sometimes it's reverse engineering those Because let's face it, when you've got a growing business, who's got the time to sit there and rename all your files and put them in the nice folders? Because you don't know what you don't know at the beginning. You don't know you're going to need a folder for this. So you kind of create an organic structure which works for you to some degree, but it's not scalable. So we do see people in various states of disorganization, but there's never any judgment, obviously.
Yeah, I always remember someone saying to me, well, start with your spreadsheets, and even if you've got no properties, or even if you've just got one property, just put it in the spreadsheet and and map it all out. And I remember thinking, well, what's the point? Because I've only got one property with one tenant in. But actually they were so right, because it's easier to just build on something that you've got, that's some foundations, rather than, as you say, just all very ad hoc and random folders and random documents everywhere. So for people who are starting out, maybe maybe they've got a few properties, or not really a system on, perhaps they're letting the agent take care of things. What do you suggest in terms of maybe systems or apps or processes that they can start with to make life easier when it does come to the point that they want to bring in a team?
That's a really good question, actually. I would definitely start with a cloud storage solution. My personal favorite is Google Drive or Google Workspace, because when you're sharing files with a team member, there's not necessarily a cost for them to then access your files and folders. So that's my personal favorite, or perhaps OneDrive if you're a Microsoft-based person, OneDrive and Google Drive. I would keep a good spreadsheet. There's nothing wrong with a spreadsheet. In fact, some of our clients prefer spreadsheets, even though we've tried to put in different systems, they go back to a spreadsheet. So I would have a spreadsheet try and capture every bit of tenant data you can. Ask the agent for a copy of the AST, make sure that they've got a copy of the deposits registration certificate, get your tenants' contact details, just put all of that in a spreadsheet. It's not a huge amount of information as you go. Even if you've got an HMO portfolio, you've suddenly got 5 new tenancies, just take that time to put it in a spreadsheet, because having that information is so key. You own that information as the landlord. It's your data, so don't be afraid to ask for that from the agents.
Especially the deposit one, sometimes it's overlooked,
mm-hmm.
and then you've always got a copy. With the best will in the world, agents sometimes do go bust. They and take all their data with them, and then where are you? So I agree, getting a copy of everything is really important.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you just don't know what could happen along the line, and there's no point going into a relationship thinking, oh, this could happen. But it's just having ownership of your data, so that that AST, you've got the AST, you know exactly what the terms of the agreement are. You're perhaps copied in on or sent the information. For example, was the prescribed information sent with the deposit certificate? Was the how to rent guide, which one was sent? And because these things, as you go along, if you do need to serve notice, you're going to need to know that those things are in place. So having that information is key. And other than that, really, I would say something like Trello or Asana, which is a really simple task management app. I would get an account and start filling out some to-do boards. So try and keep things online. I mean, we all like a list, and there's nothing wrong with that. I have my to-do actually in my notes on my Mac. I don't always put it into my task management system, but having that overview of what to do, when to do it, is really easy to then onboard new people. So start to get in that mindset of using your apps for different things, but I wouldn't overwhelm yourself with too many different tasks and tools, and certainly not with a CRM system. I mean, I would definitely bring on a CRM system maybe when you've got maybe 25 tenancies or more, but underneath that, I think you can use Asana and Trello or a simple spreadsheet just to get those foundations in, and then perhaps advance onto a CRM when you get to that point.
Yeah. And do you have a software that you use to do the ASTs, for example, or to manage it? So the CRM that you mentioned there, is that something that you guys would take care of, or would you expect the client to have their own?
So every client would have their own subscription. So we don't have a centralized system that we then use put different clients' information in. So if a client needed a CRM, we would say, right, let's have a look at this one, this one, this one for these reasons. We think they'd be best for you, depending on what they were looking for. We would get them to sign up, but we would populate all the data. So they still own all that information, because it's the client's data at the end of the day. So we try and have everything on our client's domain, for emails, for example, for Google Docs, etc. And we just log in with that information and access everyone's differently. And yeah, it depends on which system we're using. But for example, ASTs, we tend to use maybe the NRLA's templates and the addendums. Some of the different CRMs, you can create a template within those CRMs, or they have pre-populated templates. But every client, every team member works differently too. But generally, we do call on the NRLA quite a lot for the resources.
Yeah, that's useful. And is there situations where you find that when people, in terms of the ongoing management, how involved does your team get, or where does the responsibility lie between? Obviously, the responsibility always lies with the landlord, but how involved do they get? So are they calling the plumber and arranging that with the tenants? And
yes, yeah, we do that. I mean, because that's one of the things that takes so much time for the clients to deal with. So we try and take that on, if they haven't already got that in place. So we become the first point of call for the tenants, whether that's on a WhatsApp group, if that's already the system, or perhaps we try and introduce better systems to manage those inquiries, especially if it's a big portfolio of HMOs, and arranging all those contractors. We try and build a contractor list, try and do research into the best contractors, but we take on that role because it's so time consuming. So we would speak to the contractor, get the quotes, get some before and after pictures, liaise with the tenants to make sure they're in, perhaps put the contractor in touch with the tenants, but manage the whole process, because it's something that we don't want our clients to have to do.
it's so, you're right, it's so time consuming, that part, just chasing contractors and chasing tenants and trying to follow up and make these things happen.
Exactly, making the payments as well, paying the invoices. We like to take care of that as well. So really, we would love our clients to be, I wouldn't say completely hands off, because I think it's important to not be too passive in your portfolio. I think for us, it works best when maybe the clients do either the viewings or maybe the inspections. They're quite keen on knowing what's going on in their properties. They care about the properties. And we just take care of all of the desktop-based operations. That's our, or maybe they use an agent to do the tenant find. So, but that's when it works best. Everything that we can do on the phone, on the computer, then we can take care of that.
And is there anything else that you notice with people that come through that maybe perhaps not mistakes they've made, but things they've overlooked that would have been useful if they'd have set up at the beginning?
Definitely the compliance side of things. So many landlords forget the expiry dates of their guest safety certificates, or even things like their insurance. Making a note of those, and that's why task management systems like Asana or Trello are really handy, because you can just set a due date to remind yourself, and then you can forget until that notification pings up or that email pops into your inbox. So you're not having to constantly remember, okay, when's my guest safety run out? I would definitely say that is one of the things that gets overlooked. And obviously with HMOs, there's even more compliance. So that's one of the things that people come to us say, oh, yeah, I'm not compliant. Can you help me?
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? How, well, the responsibility of the landlord in providing housing for tenants, but there just isn't, I suppose, the level of checks on the landlord that there might be in other industries, that's for sure. So I think probably part of what people pay for with a service like yours is the peace of mind that they can sleep well at night. They're not worrying about, oh, I haven't checked this, I haven't checked that. So
yeah, that's exactly it. So they know that at any time they can just log on to their computer and know, if they can't sleep and they suddenly have a panic, they know that they can see exactly when, the EICR is due to expire, or probably the fire extinguisher or fire alarm is more pressing, I would say, especially with HMOs.
Definitely.
Or even HMO licenses, because they're so infrequent that they're easily forgotten and time flies. So
5 years comes around really quick.
It does.
Worryingly. Okay, and so you mentioned before about obviously people have already got some virtual assistants from the Philippines or other places offshore as well. So it sounds like that you mold yourselves into this hybrid of whatever their circumstances, if they've already got a member of the team or if they've got some systems or no systems. And so working with offshore VAs as well, do you come in and have your own systems, or do you work with ones that they've got?
It depends on what the client's set up, really, but generally if they're working with an overseas VA, they have got some kind of structure and probably a process guides. So we would just make sure that those process guides are covering all bases, particularly if the overseas VA is completing ASTs, onboarding tenants, because you have to be so careful that you've got the correct information in those ASTs to start with, making sure the documents are sent. So, for example, I've created I think it's got 60 or so steps in, like how do this, remember this, save this, do this. So we would guide that overseas VA in making sure these are ticked off for every scenario. And obviously there's other processes out there, for example, responding to adverts on spare room or how to handle XYZ. So a couple of clients we have Filipino VAs. So we come in on more like a managerial operations level, so that the client doesn't have to have those conversations with the VA, because quite often we have more understanding of it because of the experience than a landlord would, because generally most people aren't trained in all the legislation and lettings before they start their property investment business. So they're just winging it quite often.
Definitely.
So we say, right, now this is what you need. This is how to handle arrears. This is what happens as soon as someone doesn't pay. This is what we put in place. And either we do that, or sometimes we get a Filipino VA in the business to do that. But also Filipino VAs are great at doing all of the sourcing, the right move scraping, and actually presenting that in a format that we can then say, right, no, that doesn't meet space standards, that won't work as an HMO because of XYZ, or no, that's in an Article 4 area. Or so quite often we work with clients and overseas team members to do the kind of higher level filtering of potential properties.
Okay.
And then take it through the offer process, all the conveyancing side. Some of our team have got a lot of experience in the conveyancing side. So I might get one of our team members to work on that with the client, pushing those through, just grabbing that information from to do with lending, or chasing solicitors, or just deciphering what the solicitor needs and remembering that we've answered every question. All these things that do take so much time, and it's very email heavy and admin heavy. So following through then from completion, the property development process. So some of our team help clients purely on project management support for new builds, for renovations, and all the moving parts that go on with that. Really, everything we can do from the desktop. Chasing contractors, sending out tender documents, answering responses, getting obviously all the welfare units sort of ordered, and procurement, and all those things really. And I've actually created just also steps, every single step to think about through, so we can drop that template into our clients' business and work through those steps, so they've got a system to work through.
Well, it's quite the like 360 degrees of in property world that you've got covered there.
Yeah, we do. I mean, we do focus mainly on the lettings because that's where the demand is, to be honest. Clients have got the cash flow coming in from the lettings. It's painful for them, so they just want someone to deal with it. But we do have some clients that we do the project management side too.
I guess that, landlords are buying the next house and then
exactly,
it's like, can you call my builder?
Yeah. Exactly that, because through every stage of property there's the fun parts and then there's the not so fun parts that kind of get left in the inbox and don't get dealt with, and so that's where we come and scoop those up and get them moving again.
Amazing. And so how about yourself then in your property journey personally? Is it focused mainly on the business now, or you looking for more to grow your portfolio as well?
Well, possibly, yeah. I do have the kind of got the itchy feet again when it comes to buying properties. I mean, my last projects were really in when I built the shipping container office blocks down in Bristol. But now possibly a little flip next year. We'll see. But I've been very focused on setting this business up. No shiny star syndrome for me. I've been trying to
It must be very tempting if you've got all these assistants who can just go out and source deals for you.
Yeah, it is tempting, but I think I've had to really focus the last 3 years on this business. So as it becomes more systemized, it's very operations heavy for me, managing the team. I have 18 team members now. And whilst they're all super experienced and self-sufficient in many ways, there's always questions. Obviously, there's new clients coming on, inquiries, and that comes with it, different meetings and introductions and follow-up. So at some point, I'll be having an operations assistant to help me free up my time.
I think it's funny when you're in the property world and then you start connecting with people, and like, I'm sure it was like my VA and your VA, emailing each other back and forth, and it's nice to actually have a face-to-face even on Zoom, because in the background we've got these teams who are just making it all happen. So how do you see that it's going to pan out with the likes of obviously ChatGPTs on the scene and the influence of AI in working with assistants in more of an admin role, I guess, because there's so much that it can do now?
I don't think I've really tapped into the potential. I think, for me, I use it. I know my clients use it for sort of copywriting, but within there's so I get asked quite a lot of questions around using it in the prop tech world. So how it can be used for a tenant find, or the answer is I'm not really sure.
It's all very new.
Yeah, I tend to try and focus more on the tech that my team and my clients can use now that solves problems. But I'm sure that there are amazing ways of automations between platforms, or suggesting new ways of working. I'm always open to tech. I love tech. I love it for tech's sake, but I love the solutions that it provides. So let's see what happens.
Well, it will be a really interesting place, I guess, in the next couple of years to look back on how things have changed. That's for sure. So exciting times if people are willing to embrace what's going on and and work with the tools that we're going to be having just at our fingertips. It's for the first time really that we get to be in control of all of these tools. So let's see what happens. Great. All right, then where can people find out more about what you're up to and what kind of clients do you typically work with? Then you mentioned before about the size of the portfolio and the number of tenants, but
so generally for the VA side, we work with clients that maybe have, I would say, 10 to 15 single lets or 20 to 25 tenancies or more. But as I mentioned before, I'm creating some resources that are downloadable one-off purchases, which are really structures and templates on how to manage a property portfolio, from the operations to the lettings to the maintenance side. So they're going to be released shortly. And they are really suitable for people with maybe 10 or fewer properties that want some structure, don't quite know where to start, but or perhaps can work with their Filipino VA to build those systems out. So there'll be checklists, there'll be folder structures, process guides and things in there too. So you can find me on Instagram. I'm on Instagram mostly, and LinkedIn occasionally, but I would say Insta is the place to find me, and our website, which is beam-va.com.
Amazing. Well, we'll put all the links to that in the show notes. And yeah, it'd be great. Everyone loves a checklist, so especially the landlords that they just want, right, tick, tick, tick. I've done my bit. Now go on and conquer the world. So yeah, I'm sure lots of people will check you out for all of those. Great. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Jane, and we look forward to seeing what happens with the business in the next coming years, and all the best with it.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, and for anyone who is not yet a subscriber to the magazine, click the link in the show notes for your free 30-day trial. See you next time.